in my opinion, as a criminal justice major who studies emergency management, this is a textbook case for officials being responsible and protecting their community in a situation that is just unbelievably dangerous.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leading in a Crisis podcast. On this podcast, we talk all things crisis management with an emphasis on crisis communications. I'm Tom Mueller. Thanks for joining us. On our show today, we're going to do another deep dive into the chemical incident that happened in Orange County, California over the Memorial holiday weekend. And our guest today is Alex Datig. Alex is a journalist who covered this incident on the ground and brings a different kind of perspective to the whole response and how communications were managed. Alex, tell us a little bit about yourself and your publication.
Okay, Tom, it's really, really good to be with you. I'm so glad you chimed in. I was looking at your podcast, and crisis management is something that is very important to address, especially in situations like the one that we've just seen in Garden Grove. So I'm so glad you chimed in. It's good to rub some elbows with experts like yourself who really understand crisis management. So thank you. I'm a journalist and I'm a videographer. I'm credentialed with the Los Angeles Police Department and with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I've had Front Page Index for 11 years, and I work on a lot of different stories that gain national news attention. I work with several different networks and distributors. So, but this particular incident really caught my eye because I was in the Palisades fire. I was on PCH during the Palisades fire. And I've lived in LA 37 years, so I've been through the Northridge earthquake. I've been through the LA riots. I've been through the major stress tests here in Los Angeles. So I saw that Orange County was really experiencing a massive, massive crisis that affected the community in ways that I had studied as a criminal justice major. And I'm also certified with the Department of Homeland Security in interagency communications. So for me, this was something where I could really kind of zero in on my skills, but the intensity of the situation cannot be overstated.
Yeah, so this is, again, this podcast is part of our discussions around the Garden Grove chemical incident that happened over Memorial Day weekend. And Alex, you first came to my attention because I was very closely monitoring communications across that incident, and I saw some of your live reporting from different locations, just showing people what was happening on the ground in different spots. And so you were a really good source of information, of current information in an environment, where it's hard to really assess and understand what's happening right now. And that's why I wanted to have a chat with you on the podcast here, because my sense is that the Unified Command and the incident management team did a really good job communicating with the community. But you were on the ground there and actually interviewed PIO and were out looking at some of the press conferences and that. I just really wanted to get your assessment. How did you think communications went overall between the civil authorities and the community?
Well, I think that the communications to the public went as well as it could. As they wanted to keep the public safe. They didn't want anybody to going into a hot zone with a blast zone and all of that type of thing. So I thought getting the community out of there was really good. I did, however, notice there was a lot of homeless people still roaming around, even though the entire area had been evacuated. So that's one element that I saw that was not addressed. These people were just sitting around and could have easily become victims of of an explosion had there been one, or a chemical leak. So that's the only part that I really saw where that was sorely missing. Also, the shelter space kept running out fairly quickly. so all of those things were handled in a way that was very fast. I think that had there been an accident, I think we would have looked at something like a Hurricane Katrina type of situation where people would have just been out of everything and just, not eating for days, maybe even, that kind of thing, had it been as catastrophic as they said, because there really wasn't FEMA on the ground. I didn't see that. There wasn't a National Guard. I also noticed that the barricades that were put up around the perimeter of the evacuation order zone was the barricades were not guarded, some of them, and it was very actually easy to access the site where the tank was, which was why I was able to get there for 3 days.
Mhm.
So I
So
would
you
have liked to have seen more restraint there.
so you did a typical journalist thing and just bypass those roadblocks to go into where the story was really happening then, right?
I didn't have to bypass the roadblocks. I found ways where I could legally enter without bypassing a roadblock. I
Mhm.
bypassed maybe one or two, right, very close to where the tank was. But outside of those two, all I had to do was go into the business parks, because that area was an industrial park, and you could just drive through the business parks and through the parking lots of those business parks, and there was an easy way in and an easy way out. There was all kinds of ways you could get in there without having to go through the roadblocks.
Mhm.
So that's one thing I saw where it was like, no, the evacuation zone was not airtight, although where the police were stationed, they were very good at where they were stationed. But it was very easy to get around those without feeling like you had breached an area.
Mhm. Well, I was pleased to hear the police chief and uh, Chief Covey mention that they had put additional, police officers patrolling the evacuated areas to keep people's belongings safe, keep their homes safe. So they were taking some action in response to that. But Alex, as a journalist on the ground there, I wonder, did you feel like you were getting the information you needed and wanted to communicate out? And what were your key channels for getting that information?
Well, the best information that I got was firsthand, which video that I was able to take and that I was able to go to the zone. The first day that I went in there, I was not allowed to drive in, but Garden Grove PD told me that I had the permission to walk in, and that was during the worst time. Okay.
Okay.
Now, I know as a journalist, having been in the Palisades fire and having reported during the worst time of that fire, I knew that I entered at my own risk. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I've done this before, but I've done it before in LA County, where I know the officials, where the police chief knows me, where the sheriff knows me, where the DA knows me, and where I have those relationships. What was different from Orange County is I did not have those relationships. So what I saw firsthand was a little bit difficult for me to get the information I wanted. Like, for example, the tank temperature, right? They said, well, 100 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius, big difference. That's not a question we really have an answer to. And it makes all the difference in the world, because when you're talking about a thermal runaway and you're talking about a 4-to-1 ratio expansion of matter, uh, when the blast and the pressure is a lot different from centigrade, Celsius to
Mhm.
Fahrenheit. So that's something that I was very curious about, that I didn't feel like I could ask, because everyone was very tight-lipped. They were not talking. And then also the first day that I went in, which I think it was a Friday, uh, I did experience a little bit of I experienced an immediate headache when I entered the zone, when I got close to the tank. And the headache got worse overnight. And when I woke up, it was really bad. And I did have a chemical taste. And like I bit into a bar of soap. and it was pretty bad. And I tried to chew gum and eat a bunch of things, and there was this constant talk of there was no leak, there was no chemical exposure, but we then found out there was a crack in the tank. Well, and the pressure was released, right? So if there was a crack in the tank and the pressure was released, what exactly came out? So
Yeah.
for them to say there was nothing there, I beg to differ.
That was the one statement I really questioned. As one of the county health department officials said that there was no leak, there were no vapors released, and all of that,
No.
which sort of is counterintuitive when you have a high pressure vessel that suddenly depressurizes. That steam and those contents inside that drum went somewhere, right? So
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
that was the
And how
one that.
much of it went and how much pressure was there? These are all answers we're going to get in the after action report,
Mhm.
which will be watered down, if you'll pardon the pun.
But
So,
they did have air monitoring, active air monitoring going on around the facility, right? Now I don't know, how tightly grouped that was, but these are professional air quality and health department folks, so you figure they know how to do some air sampling in the area, and so
mm,
we
yes,
trust
they
their
do.
credibility
Yes.
and that. So that's a buffer, a safety buffer that we're getting. But for them to say, hey, there was no emissions whatsoever, was kind of odd. Hey,
Well, we
did you
don't know
ha
what they were sampling for, too, Tom. It's like, you can say, oh, AQMD is doing all kinds of air monitoring. Yeah, but what exactly are they sampling for? So that's the other question. And that's an answer
Yeah.
that I did not get when I asked.
Hmm. Fair point, because this MMA chemical is probably not something they're actively monitoring for, but would it show up on some of their normal and routine tests? You're right. That's a great question that not sure the answer to that one yet. Hey, Alex, did you participate in any of the press conferences? And I was able to watch those remotely from
Mhm.
my location here in Houston. But I was curious if you attended any of those, if you thought
Yes.
they went well, or just what was your assessment as a journalist, standing in front of them?
I think that yes, I went to the two main news conferences. The one where the fire chief McGovern, the first one where he said that all that they had been able to eliminate the threat of explosion, and then the news conference the next day where all the officials gathered. I was up for 36 hours just waiting for that final news conference. And I was at that news conference as well. Now, the first news conference where Chief McGovern was there, I had seen that Lee Zeldin, EPA Chief Lee Zeldin, had said that he was looking for the number to become 85 degrees when they had reached, I think, 93 degrees. And so Lee Zeldin early on had said, he thought that the threat of explosion was minimal and that it was probably going to be either a chemical spill or that they would be able to neutralize whatever was in the tank, meaning the MMA. So my question was, would they be able to bring the temperature down to 85% on that day? And they were not able to answer that question. Now, again, I think that they were really worried because the temperature gauge on that tank only went to 100 degrees. So they didn't know if it would go beyond that. And what I did learn was that the number that was most worrisome was between 125 and 140 degrees, where they would see the thermal runaway and they would see the
Right.
subsequent explosion. So when they realized the tank would only go to 100 degrees, they didn't know whether it was going up or down. So that's why they had to go in and manually take the temperature of that tank, which I don't know how they did that. I know they had drones that had thermal capabilities that they flew over, which is how they discovered the crack in the tank. They didn't know that until the thermal drone was able to find it.
Right.
So yeah, so
So
it,
overall, press conferences you thought were well managed, and I think that first one had five speakers. The last one had 9 different speakers, and I really question the utility of a press conference where you have 9 speakers. But this
Yes.
is, you can see the ramp up of the political aspects of the response as it drags on. More and more politicians, elected officials want to have their 2 minutes in that limelight because that then becomes a video clip for a campaign or for your website, whatever it is. But you get that visibility. And, God bless the PIOs who have to organize this and get everybody lined up to do that. So,
The PIOs were very straightforward. They were very straightforward, as straightforward as they could be. Especially the thing with the crack in the tank. There was a PIO who said there were several cracks. Then he said there was one crack, and then there was some inconsistencies there. But so he had made some misstatements in one way, but then corrected himself in another, and he was kind of called out for that. But he really did the best he could.
Alex, one of the things we didn't see in these press conferences was the company representatives being there alongside elected officials, emergency responders. Um,
Exactly.
And yeah,
Right.
what was we saw some written statements. The first one came out on day 5 of the incident.
Mhm. Mhm.
What was your assessment on the company engagement in this whole thing?
Well, they sure waited a long time to make a statement saying that they're doing everything to work with the officials. And then today they issued a statement of apology. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think the company officials should have been part of the news conference. They weren't. I think they realized that they made a mistake. And that's why I think there's a great amount of liability there. And I think we're going to find out that maybe some of the steps the officials had to take might have been unnecessary, but they did it because they weren't presented with all the information, or maybe it could have been even worse than what we thought. And because we're not dealing just with one tank, we're dealing with 3, and we're dealing with companies that are right down the street that have very highly,
Mhm.
chlorine and surfactants and oil and gasoline and things like that. So I think that the level of community endangerment that we saw there was just so beyond what we realize at this point, is my
Mhm.
feeling, that this company knew that they are in big trouble, and that's why they knew that anything they say can and will be used against them, because I think they're going to be on the hook here.
Well, I wonder if it's a case where the company was just unprepared to deal with the communications around an incident like this. Because I know this GKN was predecessor company was acquired not too long ago, a few years ago, by a UK-based firm. And you
Oh,
could tell from the statements coming out that the statements were coming from London or somewhere in the UK. And the
oh.
firm they'd hired to represent them was a UK-based firm with some offices here in the US. That's kind of a PR crisis firm called Brunswick. And
Mm, mm,
so I wonder, sometimes it's as simple as that, is like so many, smaller manufacturing facilities, they just really hadn't thought about the implications of a major incident on their site, had not developed a crisis communications plan for that facility, for those main, risk
mhm.
potential incidents they had.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. That's going to be, I think a judge is going to order them to have one of those. And I think they're probably going to be placed under some kind of probationary period where they have to report, uh, you know, whatever measures they're going to take. But because you're absolutely right, the crisis communications aspect from the company's standpoint is leaves a lot to be desired for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I was impressed with the way, they were sort of pulling in third party ideas, suggestions for how to deal with it. There was one humorous moment as I was watching this where it was apparent that they were getting a lot of suggestions from residents about things they might do to, help resolve this situation. And the Orange County Fire Authority tweeted at one point, we have good people working on this. Please stop sending, your suggestions in, the
Mhm.
emails getting cluttered up here. So
Yeah.
please stand down on those suggestions.
Mhm.
And I worked the Deepwater Horizon oil spill
Oh my
on
goodness.
the Gulf Coast some years ago. And there we had to set up a whole division to manage the suggestions
Mm,
that were coming in from all over the world for people about how to stop a runaway oil well under 5,000 feet of
mm,
water in the Gulf of Mexico. So I could relate to
mm,
what they may have been seeing in the command
mhm,
post there.
mhm,
But to me, that
mhm.
was just kind of funny. But Alex, I was curious, this happened on a holiday weekend, right? And it just
Yeah.
seems like that's when the big things are going to happen. I'm curious, as you were sort of watching things evolve from Thursday evening, through Tuesday, could you tell it was a holiday weekend when this thing started with the number of, communications resources or unified command staffing, just from your vantage point? Could you tell, as I watched, it looked like it was a little thin on Friday and Saturday, but then, on Saturday things really picked up, and then you could tell there was a lot of resources being pulled to bear here with translation work getting done, multiple videos getting posted, all of that. What did you see as you kind of watched over the course of the weekend?
I would agree with that assessment completely, Tom, because yeah, I do think the resources, there were more resources over the weekend. I think that they were very, very worried about the tank exploding, as I was saying, and I think the more that I talk to you now, the more I think that minimizing the explosion was the end game. They weren't really saying what their strategy was. Uh, but yes, I think that you're right. There were more resources, but then also um, on Sunday night, I also noticed that people were also starting to leave. And after Chief McGovern announced that the threat of the blast had been eliminated,
Mhm.
that's when the big sigh of relief came. I didn't make it to the emergency shelters, but I was watching everything on my news monitor. I have a news monitor where I can see all the stations for Front Page Index. That's something that I specialize in, is monitoring crisis on all stations.
Mhm.
So the media was really reporting, doing some excellent reporting coming from the shelters, and just the frustration that people experienced when they were getting ready for a holiday weekend and they had to deal with this. I think the officials saw that, and I think they wanted to make sure that they created an appearance of not panic. That's something they did a really, really, really good job at. They did not panic anyone. No one was um, acting out or making demands or any unreasonable demands. That the keeping the community at a level of calm was done in a way that was unlike anything I had ever seen, and I thought it was just so well timed and so well tempered.
Yeah, excellent point there. And I think you're right. The tone of the communications, I thought, it was just extremely well managed. First of all, you had a very
Yes.
experienced unified command team out there, right? The people
Yes.
that they put out front to communicate with the community on a daily basis just resonated with credibility.
Yes.
And you could
Yes.
tell
Absolutely.
as they were speaking, they knew what was happening. But you also got that really personal, heartfelt emotion coming across from the incident commanders and the unified command about, hey, we want you to be safe. That's our bottom line is we're doing everything we can to keep you safe. We need you to stay out of these evacuation zones. And here's why. Here's what we're working on. Here's the threat. And they just, I thought, did a terrific job of capturing the emotion and feeling the emotion that was happening through
Yes.
that incident.
They connected very well with that community and with the media. So I would, I'm in no position to commend anyone, but if I were to have to speak to someone being commended, I would say yes. I mean, the fire department, the police department, they did everything they could. They were so patient. They were especially patient with me because I kept entering the hot zone. And there was one night where the red hat came and tried to throw me out, and did.
Who's the
So
red hat?
well, the fire chief,
Okay.
the frontline red hat with, oh geez, he was a hothead too. He was a perfect red hat because he was a hothead. Boy, did he come up, and he had steam coming out of his ears when he saw me. But and I had a I was it was like, you're not in your gear, you're not in your protective gear, ma'am. And I had already been there twice before.
Right.
So I took out all my protective gear, put on my fire jacket, my helmet, and no, you can't stay. It's not safe enough for us to be here. We're gonna leave. So they threw me out. That's okay. They were very, very patient with me. And I later went to the fire chief. I went to McGovern and I said, please, thank you so much for being so patient with me and allowing me to do my work as a journalist. And by the way, I gave Garden Grove PD, I gave them both of my credentials for LAPD and the sheriff, and I gave them my driver license. I said, this is who I am. This is what I do. If you see me, this is what I do. If you need to come pull me out, pull me out. So I always work with law enforcement as a journalist when I go into an area like that, because I don't want them to think that I'm a TikToker or a YouTuber an influencer. That's not what I do when I go into places like that. I go in to find the facts and report the facts as I find them.
Alex, just a quick aside here. Did you happen to watch any of the Garden Grove Town Hall meeting that they had Tuesday evening?
I did not. I saw about a minute of it. Unfortunately, I did not. I really wanted to be there. I couldn't be there for that, but I would really like to know how that went. Did you see that? Did
I
you have a
did.
chance? You
I
did?
did.
What was it like? What were the chief complaints? I'm curious.
It was well, first of all, you had some of the more elder community residents coming up and offering their
Mm.
comments and thanks to the fire department, the police department, the city staff for everything they did to keep people safe, to keep things organized. So you had a really nice thank you moment and appreciative moment. But
Oh,
then
good.
there was a number of groups that were just using this as a stage and an open mic to kind of do their own protest. There was a Free
Mm.
Palestine group that
Oh dear.
came up and was screaming at the city council that they need to stop supporting the military industrial complex like GKN that is building tools that are killing Palestinians today. So you had that whole theme and a couple of speakers with the same script coming up with that. And then you had it was like the Democratic Socialists had a group there who, came up and sort of read the same statements. And they actually had really nice colored placards that they were holding up, which
Hmm.
I thought was amazing for a meeting that had only been sort of publicly announced a few hours before. But it was very well organized. And again, it was all about stopping the military industrial complex and getting companies like GKN out of this community. So it was a larger political agenda that was played out and appeared to be pretty well funded, actually.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure. I would
That's
expect there's,
unfortunate. That's
yeah,
very unfortunate. I hate hearing that because it really was just it was probably one of the greatest examples of a successful emergency operation that I've seen. And I don't know of one that has been, maybe the Sandy fire was also pretty good, the way they prevented houses from burning. In the Sandy fire, one home burned
mhm.
in that recent fire we had. I couldn't believe that, and there were a lot of homes at risk. So that was pretty amazing too. But this particular incident was very, very serious. And for these officials to have handled it the way they did, in the manner in which they did, really has to go, in my opinion, as a criminal justice major who studies emergency management, this is a textbook case for officials being responsible and protecting their community in a situation that is just unbelievably dangerous.
Okay. Alex, I think we'll leave it there now. Thank you so much for taking some time this afternoon to come and join us and give your thoughts and perspective on this Garden Grove chemical incident. Thank you again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Leading in a Crisis podcast. Thanks for joining us. Again, if you'd like to email the show, drop me a line at tom@leadinginacrisis.com. We'll see you again for another episode soon. Take care.